As a ranged DPS, you are really going to want to stand near the boss until it is time to move out for a mechanic. Don't be that ranged DPS out on Saturn, twerking alone in the VIP, wondering why no one likes you. Get up close and kiss the chef serving you up some sweet buffs and heals. So at this point, I have done a lot of talking about the jobs and trying to help everyone find the right fit in Final Fantasy XIV in the new player guide reboot. A new player guide reborn, if I may. Now, this video is going to be all about explaining the various roles in Final Fantasy XIV. And when I talk about things like roles, I thought when I was making the title of this video, are people gonna think it's obvious? I'm a tank. I tank. Duh. I'm a healer. I heal. Duh. He's just doing it for clicks. But then I realized that is exactly why I need to make this video. First things first, every single job in Final Fantasy XIV is responsible for doing DPS. DPS is DPS, tanks are DPS, and yes, healers are DPS. This game is absolutely teeming with opportunities for healers and tanks to contribute to DPS, and each healer is given abilities to enable them to effectively DPS in nearly all situations. White Mage isn't given flatulence misery, a literal lily nuke cannon of death because of the memes. I mean, blood for the blood lily is a meme, but you know what? It is a meme because that hits hard. What about Warrior's Spellcleave spam? Paladin's Holy Magic Explosions of Death? What about Dark Knight with literal blood spiller spam into Salted Earth, Carve and Split? Or what about Gunbreaker's Gnashing Fang into Savage Claw into Jugular Rip, Abdomen Tear, and Eye Gouge combo? Yeah, that sounds like we want sweet innocent tanks, huh? And BS aside, all the flair aside, this is a great thing for anyone playing Final Fantasy XIV. If you are a raider, if you are someone pursuing mastery and wants some level of skill or mastery or depth into your class, as someone who watches so many other YouTubers, I've stumbled across Limit Maximum, who has spoken literally about this exact same problem, that tanks and healers aren't really fun when you're on farm of a fight. It's like, yeah, during progression you're gonna have fun, but they really hit a ceiling in farm. Where, yeah, progression is gonna be fun, but as soon as you get to farm, you're seeing people literally just peace out and be like, I'm not tanking, I don't want to heal, this is all boring.
For a certain role than others, right? And it kind of varies. But like, in farm it's miserable, whereas DPS in farm is just continuing to be fun, which is why you see a lot of the better players in the game DPS, because at the end of the day, people play the game to have fun, right? Like, farm tanking just sucks. And it's really hard to get better at a game when you are not just feeling it. Anytime anyone gets better, man, you're just like, you're logging on the game with like a goal and you want to have fun and it's fine. I think it's just really rare. It's like really rare.
I'm gonna pull up Warcraft logs and compare DPS to healers or tanks. Even the so-called DPS healer, which is Discipline Priest, is doing the sixth, roughly a sixth of a single DPS's DPS, and the others are far worse than that, which is kind of obscene to me personally, because the big reason that I have no intention to raid in World of Warcraft in any point of time is just I need a higher ceiling. I really need a higher ceiling to grow into. But now if we change our look to FF logs, then we're seeing healers do slightly above 50% of DPS, which is really a really big ceiling to fit. That's why when you look at these box plots, you can see, oh my god, like there's a huge range, even between the quartiles, there's a huge range within each of the quartiles. And it's like, yeah, there is a lot of room to grow. Which is honestly a great thing, because even if you have a raid on farm, whether it's Seed of Sacrifice Extreme or Shiva Savage, then you have an extremely large window of opportunity to improve. The same thing goes for tanks. You're constantly managing uptime, improving cooldown usage and mitigation, ultimately needing to perfect your rotation at the same time. Like, an incredibly skilled paladin can totally use their holy DPS combo to move and dodge mechanics while hammering damage on a target. That is actually one of my favorite features of the paladin that makes it distinct from the other tanks, is explicitly that. Or a skilled Astrologian will be slide casting alongside in tandem with the OGCD weave window to be super mobile and weave in off global cooldowns. And maybe that seems tangential, but it is a huge selling feature of 14. I can tell you, I don't play a game to be bored or stagnate. That's one reason why I've actually gravitated towards 14 rating. After, the next point about all of the roles is going to be that everyone has a shared responsibility to reduce the impact of incoming damage, and this does include DPS. I realize tanks and healers, literally, especially especially Scholar literally with their shields and mitigation would be obvious, but in 14, DPS should also be taking an active role in this, and this costs you, for the record, nothing. You can use Mantra, you can use Virus, you can use Tactician, all off of the global cooldown. This doesn't impact your DPS. There is no excuse to not be actively participating in this. Like ranged DPS brings things like a party-wide 10% mitigation that, when timed right, is extremely potent. This can actually be a huge game changer on things like Almagast. If you're still running it like minimum item level like Almagast, whatever, sorry, tangential. But Bard or with a tank healing amplification, you have Dancer that can amp up party healing, directly heal the party even with curing walls. That's roughly the same potency as Cure 2, roughly. Magic DPS all get Virus, which lowers the damage that a target deals by a massive chunk, or Summoner, where when they pop Phoenix at the right moment, like if they manage to get their cooldowns at that moment, is chef's kiss. It applies a massive heal over time to the entire party. That is very significant. Or melee DPS to get the ability Feint that lowers the dex and the strength of a target, that when used properly makes healers' lives much easier. Like if you can actually make that strength dex on a tank buster given that type, that is gonna relieve a lot of pressure. Or another example is monks also get the ability Mantra that amplifies the healing done to allies, which is very useful. Like when you're getting raid wide damage, it's so good. Tanks also get tons of utility to mitigate, like Paladin. They get the ability to do party-wide barrier, multiple forms of damage reduction, including assuming all damage for the target with cover. They get reduced damage taken by 15% even to a single target. Party-wide 15% damage reduction with wings is huge. But the point is that all roles in 14 also play an extremely important role in minimizing the damage. Which, when we're talking about minimizing damage, why do we care about that? Minimizing damage opens up more opportunities for healers and tanks, because a comfortable tank is going to be a happy tank, to contribute more to DPS, which means you're going to make that in-range turn, which means that you're going to clear that expert dungeon much faster. And honestly, when we're talking about things like grinding relic weapons, everything is about time optimization. As someone who finished all of the Shadowbringers relics, when I was doing Delirium Regene, when I popped in on healer, do you really think that I wasn't DPSing? Oh hell no. If you've been on this channel long enough, you saw me popping all the DPS essences, all the buffs, and just going to town. And it's definitely a huge impact. And so even for the DPS roles, you should be using your mitigation. It costs you nothing, but it makes such a huge difference to the entire quality of the run for everyone. And for some fights, it just means that you will actually meet the DPS check rather than die to enrage. So now, before I get more specific into each role, I could probably do a legit 4-hour video on each of these points, and you've been on this channel long enough, maybe, to know that I'm not bluffing on that. But for the sake of everyone's sanity, I'm going to make it more brief. I said these points for all of the roles because mitigation and DPS is everyone's problem, and there's an extremely high skill ceiling that is very rewarding. You are in a farm party pushing it, and I think that you would be very hard pressed to find someone saying in Astrology and weaving in cards, healing a savage raid, doing their full DPS, which is Malefic spam, and then using slide casting and the rest while handling their own mechanics was trivial unless someone was being very tongue-in-cheek. Now with role specific, let's start off with the tanks. The tank's main responsibility is to maintain aggro at all times and manipulate targets to enable their team to do maximum damage. No, you're not just holding them willy-nilly. You want to actually funnel them together. Whether this is tanking at one corner of the arena, dead in the center, or grouping up mobs into a triangle, dragging the puppies forward with you, or circular position, that is going to be extremely huge. Next up, they are responsible for mitigating damage both off of themselves as well as the entire party, such as reprisal abilities across all the tanks. There is no excuse to not use this. This is one of the most powerful cooldowns in the game. This is going to really enable their healers to be able to DPS with absolute impunity. A well-played tank will take as little damage as possible and let the healer, like a white mage, go hog wild with glare. A fantastic example of this is Astrologian, where the Ast only has a limited number of off-global cooldowns that they can use. But the thing is, when they run out of these off-global cooldowns, let's call that gas to make a car analogy, when they run out of gas, they run out of gas. And now they need to waste global cooldowns on healing rather than Malefic or Gravity spam, which is going to be their DPS abilities. They have 2 Essential Dignity. They have Earthly Star, Collective Unconscious, Celestial Opposition, and even Horoscope if you're feeling saucy. A well-mitigating tank will let those abilities on Ast go far. I'd know because I play so much Ast. But And it will mitigate tank more than that will let you interleave them, and then something else comes off of cooldown. Oh, that's now on cooldown? Okay, we got this other thing off cooldown. And you can interleave them and spread the cooldowns well, and let the healer do lots of damage. We have already shown it's not insignificant. And then a bad tank, though, I can speak from experience, will force me to burn everything basically within the first like 20 seconds, and then I'll be like, oh my god, I'm literally reduced to using GCD heals, which can turn a run from like a 14-minute expert roulette into like a 26-minute expert roulette at times. It is a really big difference at times. Of course, when we're talking that big of a time difference, yeah, there's external factors, but generally if some tank isn't mitigating, they're probably... You get what I mean. Leads us into the third point, which is, of course, the tank needs to fully do their full rotation for their own personal DPS. You are not devoid of damage. You are important. That boils down to a tank in 14 does so much more than eat shit and die like in other games. For healers, as you guessed, probably for the last blurb, you're responsible for keeping up the party, and the role most likely to adjust and suffer performance-wise is healers. For people making mistakes, you're probably going to be the one suffering for it. But that flexibility is what really will allow you to shine and be able to adapt. You are probably in the most control of any role at your ability to clear when you are playing a healer. You have so many tools. But likewise, that flexibility comes at the cost of you need to be mentally ready. Okay, I need to save this DPS. I need to rescue this other person here. And by save DPS, I mean like you're using essential dignity on a DPS that's going to die to the lava. Or you're needing to use rescue to yard someone right to your side instead of let them die to mechanic. You have a lot of ability as a healer to literally carry a run to some degree. Of course, you're probably not going to make the DPS check, but... you can say you did your best. But I'd actually argue every time that I was with a raid farm static healing, like a farm with solid players, that my life was super comfy as a healer. Progression, though, was nightmare fuel. Very much different story. Also, pugging solo, big nightmare fuel. Want to learn how to heal well? Pug extremes and get used to seeing every sort of disaster unfold at any given time. Land waffle mount that I love? You have no idea the amount of horrors that I witnessed firsthand acquiring this mount as a healer. Yeah, that's all I gotta say. But beyond that, your number one responsibility as a healer is to really contribute to DPS. If there is downtime at any time, you are supposed to be doing DPS. That is my opinion. That is what I have to say as a healer main myself. Like, I have to DPS. Also, for the love of God, this is one thing that is huge for healers. I'm actually going to make this its own timestamp. Let your regens work. Let them tick. Let the regens do their work. There's no point in spamming Medica 2 if you're burst healing the team to full, and then you have your heal over time effects just tick. It's overhealing. And overhealing isn't productive. That is such a waste of your effort. You let your regens work. And I cannot tell you how many times I've healed with Name It as he was learning, and I have Whispering Dawn out, and I have Sacred Soil out with my fairy also spamming out auto healing. And then he decides Plenary Indulgence plus an on-global cooldown Lily AoE heal Rapture is the answer. And I'm like, why did you waste all of this healing? And there's no incoming mechanics for the record. It's just like, if there's downtime and the raid isn't going to take damage, let your regens work. Spend that time doing damage. Now let's talk about the DPS, and I'm going to be blunt here as I go through the roles. Melee DPS, your job is to slam dunk the target as hard as possible. Space jam, slam dunk that boss into the ground. And you're going to manage your rotation the best that you can. What you're really doing as a melee DPS is you're optimizing your uptime near the boss. Melee DPS does suffer tremendously large DPS losses at being away from the boss, and so most savage raiders on melee DPS have become acutely aware of boss positionals. Of course, you can mitigate and use abilities where necessary. This doesn't cost you anything. Use it. It's on your off-global cooldown. But your focus is to be glued to that target and wail on them with absolute impunity and not apologetic about it. And hopefully not be out DPS by your white mage glaring down a target into oblivion, because that is exactly what they should be doing, and few things are as embarrassing as being on a samurai and out DPS than a white mage. Now for magic DPS, summoner, black mage, red mage. If you are not a black mage, welcome to the elite exclusives club that every progression group wants you. Congratulations, you have the single button that makes you the most desired DPS in the entire game for any group progressing through raid, revive. Res mage and summoner OP. Okay, now we can add ranged physical DPS, because once we're done talking about revive it's all the same thing at this point. Beyond that, are focusing and bursting down the target just the same as the melee DPS. You're wailing on it and don't apologize for it. But instead, now their focus is on staying away from the melee DPS and making room for the melee DPS and actually adjusting to what is going on in the fight. No one wants a summoner standing in a melee DPS spot, forcing a melee DPS to lose uptime, or alternatively wipe them with like a mechanic. But now the trick is, for any ranged DPS, is that no one likes you when you're standing so far away that every healer AoE misses you. That sucks for you because the healer's probably gonna let you die just laughing at you, if I'm quite honest. But you are gonna be missing a lot of healing. But, and it's a massive Nicki Minaj size but, guess what you're probably gonna want to stay close for even more than that. And oh yeah, as a DPS you will want to care about this. Buffs. Astral Divination, Dragoon's Battle Litany, Monk's Brotherhood, Summoner's Divination, Red Mage's Emboldened, Dancer's Technical Step, Bard's Songs of Battle Voice, and I am probably actually missing a few. You want these DPS buffs. You want big D DPS, you need these buffs. These are big, these are not insignificant. You really want them. And so stand near the boss as ranged DPS until it's time to move out. Don't be that ranged DPS out in Saturn, twerking alone in the VIP, wondering, why does no one like me? And then get up close and kiss the chef serving you up sweet buffs and heals, because honestly, baby, they deserve it. Now that is my guide to roles in 14, unapologetically.